Hello there, and welcome to a review of The Fifth Wave by Rick Yancy. Specifically, I'm reviewing this book. I found out about 2/3 of the way through that there's actually a movie or a serialized, streaming service serial thing. I don't know. Haven't seen it. Haven't seen anything about it. I probably never will. Haven't even seen a preview, but not having seen a preview, I think I can make a couple of predictions about it based on this book. Anyway, this is going to be a really, probably quite a long review. It's not a short book. It's 460 pages and it took me a disproportionately long time to read it for a number of reasons that I'll get into. So a couple of pre-comments before I get into it that are not spoilers. This is a post-apocalyptic young adult book, and for what it is, it's not bad. I failed to adore it, and many Goodreads reviewers that I read after I'd finished the book, I was astonished to find that most of them 4 and 5 stars, and people absolutely loved this book. I don't. It's a little bit too young adult for me in a couple of ways. It's not so much that the 2 or 3 main protagonists, depending on how you see it, are kind of 16 or 17-year-old. There's plenty of books with 16 or 17-year-olds as the main protagonists, where the books are complex, very suitable to reading and nuanced. I didn't think this was. I thought that there was a high level of superficiality to the writing. There was a lot of repetitiveness. The plot was often, I've got to say, the plot at times has gaping holes. And I don't mind those gaping holes that much, but it's not going to leave me super enthused if I'm reading along with the main character repeating the same internal agonizing that I've had to deal with 3 or 4 times already in the last couple of chapters. And meanwhile I'm thinking, wait, that doesn't make any sense. The dots do not connect. So that is a bit young adult for me. The inner lives of the protagonists definitely had a very strong young adult element, and I don't hate that. There's no particular reason to expect a 16-year-old to behave and think or be on an emotionally mature level as a 26-year-old or a 36-year-old. So for a young adult book, that's fine, but given what the protagonists have been through, I guess I expected a bit more, if not maturity, then at least nuance. So I didn't hate it. It's pretty good. The post-apocalyptic element of this young adult post-apocalyptic is supplied by alien invasion. The alien invasion comes in a wave. We're up to the 5th wave. Surprise, surprise. And this type of alien invasion is pretty well thought out and pretty well plotted out, and it's kind of interesting. And I can really see how, if you're a young reader yourself or you're new to the genre, as a 16-year-old might well be, then this book would rock your socks off. It'd be doing things that you've never seen before. It'd be, oh wow. I'm at least a couple of decades and many hundreds or even thousands of books past that stage of my reading career. I wasn't that enthused by it. It wasn't bad. Anyway, these aliens that have invaded Earth are not nice ones, so think V the Final Battle rather than E.T. the Extraterrestrial. And that is kind of the point. Even Rick Yancy, even in the early chapters, mentions that the main protagonist, Cassie, her father, is thinking about aliens in terms of the E.T. movie that he grew up in. And I grew up in that era too. I've seen an awful lot of alien plots. But if you're a teenager, it might be really exciting. Okay. So up to this point, we're good, but from here on, if you haven't read this book and you think you're going to, I would suggest that you don't watch, because this is all going to be spoilers. I can think of no way to explain my feelings about this book other than to tell you the plot, and so that's all spoilers. You hear me? Spoilers. Go away if you're interested. Otherwise, stick with me. I don't feel that spoilers really matter in this book anyway, because to me there were no plot twists. There was nothing that happened at any point, even for a second, that was not wholly predictable at every level. But some people, again on Goodreads, have said they thought there were plot twists. And one or two even said they didn't see something coming. I don't know how they didn't see something coming, but there you go. I mean, seriously, to me this book is around about as twisted as a length of dried spaghetti. But, you know, each to their own. Okay, so we start in this book with Cassie Sullivan. Cassie Sullivan has survived the alien invasion so far. She's living solo in the woods. She tells us she's crazy, and we have no reason to doubt her. She tends to obsess and think over and over again things which are a bit cray-cray. She's got a diary that she's writing all this in, which becomes a plot twist later, and which is how she's telling us all this stuff. We then learn about the different waves of the invasions in flashbacks. Now, I don't love flashbacks at the best of times. This is not the best of times. I think if this book had been told in a linear fashion from when the mothership first appears over Earth onward, leaving aside the little 4-note, what is it called? The Intrusion 1995. Leaving that aside, it could have started with the mothership appearing over Earth and worked its way through. I would have been much happier with it. I think that with flashbacks, it prolongs the story unnecessarily. We get Cassie in the woods being cray-cray, then we get a flashback and she has to set it all up, and then we're back in the woods, and then we're back in a flashback. A lot of people are good with this tactic. If you don't mind flashbacks eternally, then the first third of this book is wonderful. And honestly, it was pretty good for me. I really enjoyed the first third of the book. The first Cassie bit of the book was pretty good. I was with it when I wasn't reading. I was looking forward to reading. I picked it up happily. So through flashbacks, we find out that Cassie Sullivan, pre-alien invasion, was a very normal nuclear family, American, mid-American, white picket fence type girl. She had a mummy, a daddy, and a younger brother called Sammy. And it was all very normal. She went to school, she had a best friend, she was crushing on some really cute boy who will never know that I exist. We've heard that one before. And she builds that up. Then the mothership appears, the whole world is trying to contact it, they're not getting any contact with it. Repeatedly a certain quote by Stephen Hawkins is brought up where he points out that he thinks that if aliens ever appear on the world, then they're going to be well in advance of us. And it's going to be something like Christopher Columbus meeting North America, and that didn't go well for the North Americans. So it's totally setting us up for what's happened, but we know what's going to happen. We know it isn't going to be good, so that's fine. Okay, the first wave is an EMP, which knocks out everything in the world. Cars, mobile phones, electricity, batteries, everything goes flat worldwide. That's one hell of an EMP. We're definitely talking technology ahead of ours. I will accept that everyone knows about the EMP, though this starts to be my quibble with the book and how do we know these things. Cassie is at school when it happens. She sits in the stadium. She sits there with her best friend and both of them are hunched over their mobile phones which don't work, and oh my god, how are we going to survive that? And her friend tells her that she just should go up to the incredibly hot Ben Parrish and tell him that she's in love with him, whatever. She doesn't do that. Her father arrives on foot because no cars are working to take her home. And the whole world has been knocked out. There's nothing. There's no ambulances to treat people who are wounded. There's no electricity. It's America, so it's cold. Bad things start happening. No food, no cooking, whatever. One hell of an EMP. And I'm never going to ask on this one, how do we know that the entire world has been flattened? Not going there. Anyway, we do that for a while and then we hop back to Cassie in the woods doing her cray-cray thing. And we learn a little bit more about what's happening there. Then we hop back to the past. The second wave, maybe it's the second wave. Either the second wave was something else and I've forgotten, or the second and third wave. One of those was disease. And this was where it got really interesting. I really enjoyed the disease part. The notion is that you've got a modified Ebola virus, so it infects people and basically does what Ebola does, which is infiltrate all your organs, all your body, and then when your viral loading is heavy enough, it just bursts out. So basically the person bleeds to death, rupturing vessels in your eyes, all of your body, basically a pool of blood that is by now just viral loading. And it's a really interesting sequence. Now, when people get infected by this disease, most of them get it and die. A very few of them get it and recover. And a very, very few apparently are immune and never get it in the first place. So within Cassie's family, her mother gets it and dies. There may be a hint that one of them gets it because there's mention of a fever, but it might just be the fact that everything is horrible. When her mother dies, her father buries her in the backyard, and Daddy and Cassie and young brother Sammy all leave their house. Which kind of makes sense to do because there's roaming gangs of looters, etc. So they're going off. When Cassie's mummy originally got sick, there was a field hospital in the woods that her father wanted them to go to. Her mother wanted to die in her own home, so she did that. They're heading for that place first. But Cassie's father, there's some big military base with a hyphenated name. Sounds like Ballantine, something Ballantine base, where he thinks that if there is still any United States of America government in existence, it's going to be there. So they're heading in that general direction. I really loved the disease theme. I thought it was a brilliant way of wiping out a huge amount of the population. As a result of this, Cassie hates birds in the present of the novel because it was spread by birds. And I just can't help it. Well, Cassie's obsessing about hot guy Ben Parrish, who's now probably dead, and all the other things that she obsesses about over and over. I keep going, how do you know it was spread by birds? That's heavy science that you needed there. Sure, maybe someone in Cassie's family had read stories about the Ebola virus, the Ebola in Africa, and they knew how that behaves. Maybe someone in that neighborhood, on a street, is a doctor and could explain that. Maybe. But that it's spread by birds, it beggars belief that a 16-year-old girl with no contact with any media source whatsoever or any part of the outside world except word of mouth would know for utter certain that it was being spread by birds, which apparently it was. So I had issues. As I said, that was either wave 2 or 3, I'm not sure. If it was number 2, I've forgotten what number 3 is, whatever. Back to Cassie living in the woods. Through flashbacks, we learn that she and her father and the younger brother make it to this camp, which used to be a hospital. They're evading probes, which have also been introduced in the current. There's these silver probe things that fly through the sky. They're too fast to be human-based, so they've got to be aliens. They seek out people. Cassie's always trying to evade them. And then we've got all these people in the refugee camp. Of the kids, Cassie's the oldest at 16, the next oldest is 14. There's a whole heap of other ones who are about the same age as her younger brother, who's 5. A probe finds them there, and a couple of days later, by complete coincidence, these buses full of American military soldiers come to rescue them, and they believe that. The soldiers are wearing masks to protect them from the disease, and they load all. First step is to take away all their guns. Cassie has a bootleg gun, which she doesn't give up. All the other guns are surrendered, and that doesn't tip them off either. All the kids are then loaded into the buses, and there's this big scene where Cassie's younger brother Sammy gets loaded in, and her father tries to send her, but 16 is too old, so they're separated, and she promises to Sammy she will follow him. Ouch. Anyway, kids go off, everyone's collected into the main dining room or whatever, and the soldiers say, "Is everyone here?" That's when Cassie notices that the 14-year-old isn't, and she probably knows where she is. Her father says she thinks her father by now has figured out that something isn't going right. I can't imagine how anyone over the age of 5 who wasn't brain dead would figure that out. Anyway, he sends her off with the soldier to pursue the 14-year-old. When they find the 14-year-old, the Soldier pulls out his gun, shoots him dead. Cassie, she pulls out her gun, which she didn't know about, shoots the soldier dead. Fine. She runs back to the camp. Poor decision making, but she's traumatized. She gets there just in time to see her father crawling out of the hall, being shot by a soldier, which then sets this huge alien Eye of Sauron type, green Eye of Sauron bomb that levels the whole place. So we know that the people who took Sammy are the bad guys. And Cassie, when the woods start to get cold back in the current day, we know someone's watching Cassie because we know that book logic. And she finally decides it's getting too cold. She daren't light fires. She's going to have to move. So she starts moving down the highway. She's really scared of silencers. Now, again, maybe wave 4 was when all of a sudden people who looked like people started shooting other people, and Cassie has figured out that they're actually aliens that look like people. I don't know how she would figure that out, but she has. And it's true. She heads down the highway. Eventually she gets shot in the knee and next by one of the silencers, and we get rotating point of view, her to him. He doesn't want to shoot her. He thinks he's fascinated by her or something. She crawls out and she's crawling in the snow and she's slowly dying. End of first part. The part I really enjoyed, really did follow it. Back in a second. Clap, clap. Clappity, clap, clap, clap. Hello. Say hello to the camera, Ripichi. Who's a squawky bird today? Now, part 2. This is where we start with another guy. He's a young teenager and he's had a bad time. I can't remember if... it was looters. Looters invaded his family home at around about the point where Cassie's family was getting sick and realizing they had to leave. His family was getting sick, and then a whole heap of looters broke in, killed or did something heinous to his mother and younger sister, and his father was already gone. His father had charged him, take care of your younger sister, and he hadn't, so he's guilt struck. He is also in a bad way. Him and a few other people have made their way to that military camp that Cassie's dad was waiting for, hyphenation, Ballantine, whatever, Ballarat, whatever. And there's this huge tent city circling it around it, but they're not being let in for fear of disease entering the base, which is still manned because the US government found that they had silencers or aliens masquerading as human in their midst. There was a huge fight, but the good guys won. Right. Anyway. This teenager gets sick, but for some reason he's plucked out of the refugee camp, taken into the base. He's given antivirals and he's kept on a drip, and he actually makes it through the sickness. Around about now, we learn that the guy in question is Ben Parrish, the guy that Cassie was crushing on, and stop me if you see how this is going to end. Ben Parrish is completely and utterly traumatized by the fact that he didn't save his younger sister. But eventually the colonel of the camp, and we know he's a bad guy already, so there's no surprises there. Colonel Alien pep talks Ben Parrish into wanting to live and joining their squads of soldiers. They're going to be taught to take over the world again, fight back against the aliens, and everyone's going to survive, right? And this is where we hit a significant center portion, like 1/3 of the book, that I didn't enjoy, and eventually I had to resort to skim reading here. Because it's basically Hollywood version of the USA military. The whole dehumanize, brainwash, humiliate, you are a little worm, we will take away your name and give you a nickname. Ben Parrish gets called Zombie because he was sick when he first came in. And of course he's got a trainer who humiliates and abuses all of them. I think that Rick Yancy really, really loves this military style. He probably grew up on Platoon and those other movies, which in the 80s I enjoyed them too. They were pretty cool. I don't know if the US military really behaves that way, but it's got a bad reputation for ruining the ability of some of its crack soldiers to think for themselves. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I know a few people from the USA military. They seem pretty normal to me, but whatever. This book is really getting off on the abuse deprogramming style of training. And it is a huge portion of the book. It's like a middle third. Actually, it's probably this much of the book is that. And it's repetitious, and it's stupid, and it's boring, and I had to skim read to get through it. I was determined to skim read and get through it because I wanted to know how the stories came to get there at the end. So some of the things about this part of the book that really, really annoyed me, where they've got kids, right? They've stolen kids from everywhere before killing off their parents. You've got the squad into which Ben Zombie Parish is put has got, the youngest is a 7-year-old girl who is traumatized and skinny, and she is being trained in the same squad as 17, maybe even 18-year-olds. I mean, that's batshit. There's no way a 7-year-old can keep up with a 17-year-old on a training course. It's just stupid. And as this 7-year-old is described, she is too skinny to even lift an assault rifle. That's just ludicrous. Absolutely ludicrous. In the squad, they've got a medic. I think he's about 10-year-old. The idea, just think back to you when you were 10-year-old. Could you have been trained to be an army medic? Could you have coped with doing dissections on human corpses every month? No, you couldn't. That's not a 10-year-old. It's just stupid. While we're going through all this, we also get snapshots of Cassie. She's been taken in by this really nice guy who's a... Oh, look, I'll get into that later. So, while we're still in the you are a little worm, zombie, whatever, one of their squad freaks out. They call it Going Dorothy. And he is taken away. He later turns up on the dissection table of this team medic. I'm surprised at 10 that he can even see over the tip of the table to medic them. He's doing a lot of dissection as part of his medic training, which, okay, fair enough. This guy turns up. It can't be coincidence that he turns up on the table of the squad that he was in. Later, it isn't coincidence because Colonel Alien brings it up with Ben Parish. It's dumb. It's dumb and unnecessary, and it doesn't advance the plot. And what are you trying to prove here? Are you trying to prove that maybe... It seems to be trying to give us some shadow of doubt that Colonel Alien is really the bad guy, but it's not successful. It wasn't successful with me anyway. So after the squad member who's been killed off by the US Army, as represented by aliens, dies, then they replace him in the squad with Cassie's little brother, who is 5 years old. I can't even. So Cassie's little brother and Ben Parish become acquainted in this squad where he can't even lift the gun and he's given sticks to pretend to shoot when they're on the firing range, whatever. So the way it's described is there's this huge battalion full of squads. The top 2 squads will graduate, all the others won't. How often this happens, I don't know, and I honestly by now don't care. We know that Ben Zombie Parish is going to become a sergeant and he's going to... His squad are going to make it to the outside. We just know because that's how these sorts of books work. And they do. And the last thing before going off into the great big outdoors is that Ben and his squad are fitted with what sounds like a single silver sunglass through which you can see people. You can see, and when they captured the base of the alien invaders, they got some alien tech that shows us who are the aliens and who are the good guys. And I'm not even going to make as much fun of that as it deserves, but here's the thing. The aliens show up as green on this scan and the good guys show up as red. And in these squads, no one questions that. I mean, walk out into the street, ask every 10-year-old you see if you had to choose between red and green, which is the colour for go, which is the colour for good, which is the colour for danger. I mean, telegraphing that heavily, why do you even bother? Why do they even bother? I don't know. But they do. And off they go into the great beyond. And the other plot twist is that when they're taken into Camp Alien, they get their brain mapped by this alien tech, and then a grain of rice is inserted into their neck, which will allow the good guys to track them anywhere. Presumably, the world in which Alien Invasion happened before Suicide Squad came out in cinemas, because anyone who'd seen Suicide Squad and didn't go, grain of rice in my neck, bad. No, they all accept it as fun, except for one. There's one character in Zombie Parish's squad who's figured it all out, because she's super smart as well as a sharpshooter. She's going to be the interference for the classic love triangle that I'm sure other books will present us with. Anyway, out they go, and Ben Parrish figures it out, and he cuts the grain of rice out of his neck, and what's her name? Sharpshooter, Ripper, something beginning with R. Also cuts the grain of rice out of her neck. She wants the whole squad to run away, but Ben Parrish is like, no, I have to go back for Sammy because I promised him I'd go back. Great, so we've got Cassie and Ben Parrish both converging on Camp Alien to rescue Sammy from the evil alien colonel. And Cassie is converging on them because she's been recuperating in this farmhouse where a nice young farm boy has taken her in and given her his sister's room to sleep in and taken care of her. And the fact that his hands are so smooth, he's probably never worked on a farm a day in his life, doesn't bother her. And the fact that someone shot her and he found her doesn't bother her. And the fact that he's got her M16 hidden in the barn and she finds it doesn't bother her. And the fact that he goes out each night with his gun, comes back claiming to have been hunting and smelling of gunpowder but without any meat, that doesn't bother her either. All these many things that don't bother her at all. And yet they do. And she keeps saying, we've got these long repetitive loops where she doesn't trust anyone, she can't trust him, but she has to trust him because even though she doesn't trust anyone, she's going to trust him. Just shoot me now, why don't you? It was stupid, and it was repetitive, and it was unnecessary. Of course, he's an alien, he's one of the silencers, and he's been stalking her since the wood and reading her diary, and that's pretty obvious because he keeps making comments about things that are in her diary, but she's a dumbass, or whatever. Which is a shame, because I quite liked her in the first third. Anyway, Evan Walker, I think he's called, is a silencer. And this is where we meet up with how we've got silencers and all these aliens in the world. So the first teaser in the book, the 1995 insertion or whatever it's called, talks about how long before the mothership came over the world, at least a teenager's worth of life before, the aliens arrived and they implanted something in the fetuses of pregnant women, including Evan Walker's mother. And then 15 years after the baby's born, it suddenly activates and the consciousness of the alien materializes inside the human teenager who's always thought they were a human teenager. And some of these have infiltrated into the base as well. That's the Sleeper Project. Or maybe that's the fourth wave. Yeah, that's the fourth wave. And Cassie knows this perfectly well, but she goes along with it. It's not a terrible sequence. It's pretty well written. It scores over many young adult novels in that instead of her doing the whole, oh, does he love me? Does he not love me? He must love me because the clouds won't rest in the sky. Oh no, the clouds went east in the sky. He can't love me. They get really wear me down after a while. In this one, at least, she's going, is he an alien or isn't he an alien? It's the same fluff-head female attitude, but at least the cause makes a little bit more sense. And eventually she comes to the terms with the fact that he is an alien, which he eventually admits to her. And he helps her sneak into base alien in order to rescue her younger brother, bringing us back to Zombie Parish Ben and Cassie, the walking wounded, converging on the alien base to rescue Sammy. I sound as if I really wasn't enjoying any of it. I wasn't enjoying the middle little maggot military brainwashing part. It was bad. It was just bad. Let's just stop there. It was bad. But the rest of it, I actually did quite like it. I like the way the book is paced. The writing isn't elaborate and the characters aren't complex. But there's lots of little things in it that make it enjoyable to read. I didn't love it. I wasn't yearning for the next moment I could pick it up and read it, but I didn't hate it. And then we reach the point where Cassie and Zombie Parish are both inside the base and they're running to get Sammy, and that's okay. And then they get him and they're recaptured, and there's a big final... You know how the bad guy in movies always has to monologue at the victims, giving them a chance to get free? Well, this book does this with Colonel Alien monologuing at Ben Parish and at Cassie about how they understand how we think and that's why they're going to win, whatever. But they don't. Evan Walker appears on the scene. He has knowledge of the base, which he previously said he didn't because he was a sleeper that had never been in contact with any of them, but whatever, all of a sudden he does. Evan Walker stays behind to blow up the base with some more of those green Eye of Sauron type explosives. The other three manage to escape because Zombie Ben's squad come back to get him in the hot Humvee. It's all okay. It's a okay ending. I didn't mind it. I did roll my eyes a few times, but in general, it will probably appeal very greatly to teens, especially those who are new to the genre, as I've said before. Post-apocalyptic, a bit grimmish, but still with that youthful teenage bounciness that is very unlikely to actually be present in experiences of this kind. At this point, I'll mention I know nothing about the movie. This review wholly relates to the book. I haven't seen the previews. I didn't know there was a movie until recently. But I will make a few bets based on what I know about the young adult genre. In this book, Cassie is actually described as interesting. She's tall and lanky, and that makes her pretending to be 12 to get into the base a bit unlikely, but that's okay. She's got she's got redhead, frizzy hair and lots of freckles. She doesn't think she's attractive, though, of course. That's got nothing to do with it. People fall in love with who they fall in love with. 2 boys, at least, do find her attractive. She's got a bit of a chip on her shoulder about pretty skinny blondes. I bet in the movie they made her a pretty skinny blonde. Tell me that I'm wrong. I dare you. At the end of the book, we're clearly set up for the next book where the classic love triangle will appear with Cassie and Zombie Ben and Evan Walker. Oh yes, Evan Walker. One thing about him that annoyed me, due to repetition, is that he keeps being described as having eyes the colour of melted chocolate. Cute, once or twice. After about the 7th, 10th time, I was starting to go, dude, Rick, surely you realise that melted chocolate is exactly the same colour as unmelted chocolate. Melted is the liquid state, solid is the not liquid state, but they're the same colour whether they're melted or not. Please stop telling me he's got eyes the colour of melted chocolate. I'm over it. But there'll be a love triangle. He's going to escape out of the exploding base somehow. He'll come and get Cassie and he'll come and find Sammy. And there'll be all the hoo-ha. The girl whose name begins with R from Ben's squad, who he clearly has far more in common with. I mean, there's going to be some argy-bargy over that, I'm sure, but she's not going to come out on top. It's pretty obvious because she's described as in unfeminine ways. She may be beautiful. Cassie thinks she's beautiful, but she doesn't smile. She's not gorgeous. She's a wonderful shot, but she's completely out and utterly desexualized, and no woman of that kind in a young adult book ever finds happiness in love. So, no chance. That's the end of the book. I'm not probably ever going to read the second one. I'm certainly not going to go out and pursue it. I'm not going to hunt it down and read it. If I'm ever stuck on a deserted island, there just aren't enough English books and I find it, I might read it. I don't have high hopes. I think all the interesting, unusual plot building elements that I enjoy probably exhausted themselves in this book, and I expect the next one to be a combination of young adult love triangle and the semi-militaristic attitude that Yancy seems to like. Again, not a bad book. I've got no idea why it was on my bookshelf. Someone must have given it to me. I hope I haven't disappointed you, whoever you were. And of all the young adult books out there to read, I probably wouldn't read this one. And I probably wouldn't recommend it. Though if you've got a 15 or a 16-year-old who you think might like it, by all means give it to them. They might see plot twists where all I saw was utter predictability. They might find a joy in it. They might, if this is the book that gets them into science fiction and alien invasions and a whole heap of other cool stuff, go for it. All those people who reviewed it 4 or 5 stars, if this is the book that gets you into reading, I am team Rick Yancy and the Fifth Wave, which is about to begin in the next book, but I don't care enough. Anyhow, if this is your good book, read this good book. Otherwise, read another good book. And thank you very much for watching what was rather a long review.